Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
Thanks for joining me for the conclusion of my conversation with Mike Zani, the CEO of the Predictive Index and the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Science of Dream Teams. We've been discussing his leadership journey and his intentional pursuit of improving company culture. Mike, we wrapped up part one talking about the Great Resignation and the best practices for employee engagement. But what do you say to those people that continuously make it about compensation?
I think compensation needs to be, we call it taken off the table. You have to be close enough so that it's no longer the defining factor. With some individuals, that'll never be the case. Some individuals will only go to the highest price, period, full stop. That they're just like, whoever's going to pay me the most, I'll go work there. Now, that's a painful lesson because comp and title are cruel masters, because you're then ignoring culture and fit and some of the things that are more lasting. But you don't have to be the 99th percentile payer, but you can't be below 50th, or you're never going to create a world-class team. So you got to get close enough so it's not the determining factor. And it varies per industry. If you were a warehouse worker and Amazon increases their base compensation to $20 an hour, guess what? You're going to lose all of your best people to an Amazon distribution center unless you try and get closer to that. And, so it all depends on what marketplace you're competing in. And we're seeing that a lot right now with, wage inflation. And actually for our hourly workers, it's about time that was happening because they were barely having a sustainable wage.
Oh, I totally agree with you. But I love how you said that, get close enough that comp doesn't become the conversation. It is a part of the conversation, but it's not the whole conversation. And when I talk all over the country, some owners and leaders want to make it the conversation versus putting the work into building great communities.
Well, it's so easy to point at, that people leave in exit interviews and, what they might easily point to is, I was offered $20,000 more.
Sure.
And that's a real number, and that'll stick with the senior leadership team. But if you try and peel back the onion on that more, they're like, I wouldn't have even taken the call from the headhunter if I really loved what I did, loved my manager, loved my team, loved the culture, loved the mission. That you never want them to pick up the phone and take the call. But people often don't, they haven't built the trusting relationships with their employees to get the honest answer during the exit interviews to find out why people are really leaving. So they'll blame it on comp because maybe you'll match it or even increase it, and maybe they'll stay another 3 months. But that
doesn't solve the problem either.
It doesn't solve the problem typically.
No, and having that relationship where you're not having the conversation at the exit interview, you're constantly establishing trust and a relationship. And you use the word love in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly, hopefully not romantic love, or
sometimes
most of the time.
It is, but not normally. That's not what I'm talking about.
No, it is really about creating a loving workplace where people deeply care about people. They know when they're having a good day. The questions they ask, how are you, are not platitudes, but really trying to find out how to support the people they work with every day. And it's not everyone in the organization, but I encourage people at our all company meetings to, if you don't have those relationships in the company, and it doesn't mean you need 20 of them, but someone who you feel really truly has your back as a human being, keep trying. I mean, it's out there, and you create that environment where people can feel like they do have community for their 50 hours of work, as opposed to, just at home.
So well said, because, the Gallup Q12, one of the most argued about question on the Gallup Q12 is, do I have a best friend at work? And that's because people don't understand it. It's not about, do I have a best friend at work? It's about, do I feel part of a community? And so if you don't feel part of the community, you don't feel loved, you don't feel like somebody has your back, however you want to phrase it, you're not going to be able to find your footing in the organization to grow and to innovate. You often talk about better work, better world. Tell us more about that. What does that mean?
That is our company mission, better work, better world. And there's an expanded form that we use internally, which is you, others, fit, better work, better world. I'll go through the you, the others, and the fit, and then I'll end with better work, better world. But we provide talent optimization platforms like ours, provide tools that help you understand yourself better, the you part. So you can be the best person on any given day that you can be. And then the others piece. It's not about just being your best person, but it's making sure that you have some tools to modify yourself so that you can connect with others the way they need to be connected with. That if you're my boss and I'm managing up to you, that I modify myself to get the most out of that relationship with you. And then fit. It's about fit with your boss. It's about fit with your coworkers, with your team, with the culture, with the mission. That when you do those things, that you create really strong workplaces where people are happy, energized, productive. When they go home at the end of the day, that you're sending home an energized person so that they can go to their more important piece of their life, their home life, what Michael Alasso calls their act two, is why you work. You work for act two. You don't work for the work.
Don't you love Michael? He's awesome.
I love Michael. He's awesome.
Love Michael.
But you go there because you create a better parent, a better spouse, a better sibling, a better member of your community, because that's what the world needs right now. They need a parent to read an extra book to their kid and be more patient with homeschooling or hybrid schooling. And they need to be more patient with their spouse as we live and work and play in the same space, which you're probably running out of as you listen to this, as I'm working in my home gym, in my remote office.
Well, and there's no barrier between work and our lives anymore, because so many, not all, but so many are working from home that when their spouse, their kids, their parent, their significant other come home, they're locked in a room working, where normally when daddy or mommy is home, it's playtime if I'm a kid, right? And so there's no longer a barrier to the way we work to live our lives. It's all commingled now. How would you recommend that employers who have this, workforce that's working from home manage that better, especially when they have a hybrid situation, which many of us do?
In 2 weeks, we've got our 2021 State of Talent Optimization report, and maybe the 2022 labeled, but the research came from 2021. Mm-hmm. And the number one reason people are leaving right now is lack of flexibility. Mm-hmm. So it really comes down to you need to create a trusting environment. So when someone says, "Hey, I'm sorry, I know I said I could make this meeting, but I can't make this meeting in the next hour or two because something came up," and that something that came up could be a kid tested positive, or was sent home from school because they had contact with someone. So we definitely need that flexible workspace and trusting environment. But we really need to do what we've sort of tacitly said we would do, which was measure productivity. Don't measure FaceTime. Don't measure amount of meetings, number of Slacks, number of emails. This is really about, are these people being highly productive or not? And if you have a highly productive person, even if they're working 35 hours a week, that's fantastic. You're paying for highly productive employees. And if they're not, help them work through how to become more productive. And people have said it, but really they're biased with FaceTime. I sit on the board of a company, and just this morning we were texting back and forth. The CEO is like, "I really want my head of HR to be local. I want them in the office 3 days a week." And we live in rural Rhode Island, And
Rural.
and I'm like, it's kind of rural. I mean,
it's not rural. Sorry, Mike. I love Rhode Island.
well, there is high density, but my friends from the city call it rural. So what's interesting about it is, are you going to get a top 5% HR talent in this sort of suburban rural area in Rhode Island within 30 minutes of here? And the answer is you might. But if you're willing to go farther afield and have a remote employee and commit to that remoteness and that flexibility, that you might be able to find that, top 5% talent. And I think having these geographic barriers and I realize if you're in the service industry and you're cutting hair or you're serving food or you're cleaning
Absolutely.
rooms, maintaining cars, you have to be where the car is, period, full stop. But there are a lot of companies that don't need that and should take advantage of this new labor pool.
Well, when you can, you should take advantage of the work from home, work from anywhere philosophy. But I find, and what I hear when I go out to talk to business owners and leaders, is that they're holding on to the way it was, the way we were. I refer to it as the Barbra Streisand, philosophy. We all want to go back to the way we were, and it's not going to happen.
I love Babs, but you're right. It's not going to happen. The one thing that we don't know where it's going to end up, but we do know it's not going back. You cannot put Pandora back in the bottle, because as soon as you say you have to come back to the workplace, your competitor is going to sit right next to you and said, nope, you don't have to come back to the workplace. I want your best and the brightest. And they're going to empty your parking lot. And that's what I got back on this remote work thing because of the productivity. If you're truly measuring productive workers, you don't care. You can free yourself from the burden to find out this employee is being productive remote. This one might not be. And this one's being productive in the office, and this one might not be. So it may not be just seeing them to make this determination, which is rife with your own personal intended or unintended bias, but really having productivity measurement tools.
Absolutely. Totally agree. What do you say to companies who have to have people working in their offices, on the manufacturing floor, in their restaurants? How can they compete in this work from anywhere environment?
Well, actually, I think it's normalized, because the workers who, if you cut hair at Supercuts, how far are you going to travel to cut hair? 20, 30 minutes from your home, maybe? Max. So if that is your biggest risk, is them going to a career where they don't have to be in one location. And we are seeing that. We're seeing that with our frontline workers, where nurses who are just saying, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore.
God bless them.
God bless them. I'm changing what I do. But if they're not switching, so if I'm a mechanic or a hairdresser, it's really about, can you outcompete those around you? And say, okay, you need a little more flexibility than you used to have. How can I build that in? You need a little more accommodation because of this new environment. How can I build that in? Versus, I think if you're a mechanic, you're never getting remote work unless you work for yourself and people drop cars off at your house.
Right. Yeah, but building in that flexibility and trust, and ensuring that they have choice and they don't have to just be there to punch the clock if there's no car to serve at 8 a.m. Maybe they don't have to be there from 8 to 5 just to punch the clock. So really getting creative. I love that recommendation. So what does the future of HR look like from your perspective?
Well, I think the future of HR is going to be a dual track. There are some very specific HR best practices that are, well taught at HRCI and SHRM about best practices with, payroll and benefits, open enrollment, and what have you. And there's another track of talent closer to the talent optimization side, which you don't need 10 years of human resource experience to do. You need to be a student of talent. And Laszlo Bock, one of the great thought leaders in the space of talent, former chief people officer at Google, was not an HR practitioner. He was a McKinsey and Company consultant and went to Google and then said, how can I add the most value at Google? And was like through the people side of business. And I mean, the company was already pretty good at it, but further transformed Google into being a world-class employer with world-class employees and world-class practices on how to attract, retain, develop the best talent. That I think the future of HR sees a lot more people who are just good managers, talented business leaders going into the talent side of things, not just into the business side of things.
Totally agree with you. And as you know, I constantly try to preach and teach people that recruitment is a sales process and HR inherently is not a sales and marketing function. So I love your point of view that it's going to be a dual track, but companies need to build their own tracks and build a strategy and then rely on providers to help them with that strategy, just like the Predictive Index and certainly Talent Trust as well. So I learned something about you. I understand that you coached the 1996 U.S. Olympic sailing team. Is that correct?
That is correct in what I refer to as a previous life.
Wow. You have to tell us a little bit about that journey, because being a competitor and a coach and a sailor, tell us what lessons you learned from that adventure.
Well, I had a very enviable childhood where I was able to race sailboats both in the winter and summers. And it's a little disgusting, but I ended up becoming really good at making a sailboat go fast and, competed through college, was a professional sailor post-college, making a living racing sailboats and coaching. And some of my athletes that I coached, 3 of the 4 athletes that I was coaching actively in 95, 96 qualified for the 96 Olympics, and the U.S. Olympic team asked me to be, one of the 4 accredited coaches on the Olympic sailing team. And it was a very romantic time in my life. Obviously, the Olympics is magical, but I didn't know it then. But I started going on the people journey back then, where I used to try and connect with my athletes and meet them where they were and connect with them at a very visceral level. I wanted to know their joys, their fears, their frustrations. I wanted to know how to modify myself so I could connect with them and find out what the real issues were. And after the Olympics were over, I had just spent like 330 of 365 days on the road, and it's an exhausting lifestyle. And I was like, I got to get off the road. I started in business, and business for the first time was something I was as excited about as competitive sailing. And when I went down the path of business, I took some of those lessons I learned as a coach and brought them with me, because I think the secret. A good teacher teaches something one way. A great teacher modifies themselves. It's the same thing with a manager. A good manager can manage one way. A great manager modifies to get the most out of their people. And when you do that, you unlock so much value and talent with your team and your people.
Well, that coaching discipline certainly has served you well in the business community as a CEO and a business leader, Mike. And I really want to thank you for joining the podcast. If people want to get in touch with you, how should they?
Well, there's a great way. Dreamteams.io is the book's website, and they can actually take some assessments there. And if they would like to know more about talent optimization as a discipline, there's a lot of great free content on the Predictive Index website, which is predictiveindex.com/learn. You'll see all of this great content on talent optimization. You can even get certified in the disciplines that are appropriate to where you are with your talent journey. I just really encourage people to go on this journey to be better with managing people and talent, identifying and developing it. It's really rewarding when you win with and through a great team of people.
Well said, Mike. Thank you for joining me today.
Kathleen, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and it was a joy talking to you.
The pleasure was all mine. He is Mike Zani, the CEO of the Predictive Index and the author of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Science of Dream Teams. And that's it for another episode of Dare to Care in the Workplace. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, make sure you take a second to subscribe so you automatically get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left me a review so more folks like yourself can discover the show. Until we meet again.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.